Fan theories. People have them, and I'm going to talk about them. With a show that's been around for 20-some years, there's a bunch of old theories that were really popular at one point in time, but have since been disproven. The biggest and earliest theory was that Hank was a clone of Brock and Dean was a clone of Dr. Venture, which, yeah, I can see why people considered that as a possibility. Dr. Venture takes Dean shopping for a speed suit for his birthday, but not Hank. Hank seems to get along better with Brock than with his actual father, and then there's the fact that they're both blondes. And yes, do not worry, we will be talking more about hair color later. All that said, we clearly see Hank and Dean as babies born prior to Brock being around, and Season 3 is the invisible hand of fate, so this theory is dead. Another popular theory was that Dr. Girlfriend was secretly pregnant at some point in time. I say at some point in time because this has been posited basically since the beginning of the show for all sorts of different reasons. Early on, it was because the Monarch flat out implied it.
What are you getting at?
That maybe you're hiding something from me? Like a little gift that Phantom Limb left in your oven?
All right, I knew.
Later, it was because she was shown knitting, and most recently I've seen it suggested that her heightened emotional response to Kimberly McManus was hormonal. I guess technically that last theory isn't quite dead yet, so that could still end up being a thing, but that's some pretty shaky ground to build a theory on. The story goes that some of the pregnancy foreshadowing was actually intentional, as Jackson wanted to pursue that storyline, but Doc did not. Third and final dead theory, Brock is Dermot's dad. I maybe wouldn't even call this a theory, as it was so heavily implied that Dermot was the son of Brock that you couldn't really be blamed for thinking it. I understand the concept of the red herring, but this was more like if I told you my middle name was Robert, and then a week later said, haha, you idiot, my middle name is Richard. I can't believe you ever thought it was Robert. Regardless of my being annoyed by the execution, the payoff of Dermot's actual father was pretty great. Billy's a venture, Dr. Quim is a venture, the Monarch is a venture. Basically, every single redhead who's ever lived has been speculated to be an illegitimate child of Jonas Venture Sr. In the case of Billy, Jonas assuredly would have been around Triple Threat back in the day. On the plausibility spectrum, I'd put that theory dead in the middle. It's just as plausible as it is implausible. Dr. Quim being a venture, just slightly more plausible than Billy because we know that Jonas and Dr. Quim's mom did have a sexual relationship, and that leaves the Monarch as a child of Jonas, which is obviously the most plausible based on the fact that we know he and Rusty are blood related, but it's a tough thing to commit to given Jackson and Doc's history of subverting expectations. Blood related, as they're described in the Saphrax Protocol, is such a vague thing to say that I wouldn't be surprised if there was one final surprise regarding their relationship. And speaking of the Monarch, I haven't seen this theory a ton, but I have seen this theory that the Monarch played Rusty on the old Rusty Venture show. That doesn't make a ton of sense to me, but then again, the Rusty Venture show is a little confusing when you think about it for too long. When did it air in relation to Rusty's life? How much of it was true? How much was completely fabricated? The theory attempts to explain why exactly the Monarch has a lifelong grudge against Dr. Venture, because jealousy, TV, something, I don't know. My little pet theory that I swear I made up and kept to myself and have since seen it sprinkled around the internet in various places is that the original Hank and Dean went off to live with their mom and are still very much alive. This isn't really a super popular theory because it's not really based on any sort of in-universe information and doesn't really answer any questions other than where their mom has been all this time, raising a couple kids. But I've always felt that it could make for a really interesting and emotional story. There's also some speculation about who opened the bay doors on Gargantua 1, and I've repeatedly seen it suggested that a kid Bud Manstrong did it. I mean, he was there, and he survived, obviously, so sure, maybe. People have speculated that he somehow saw the sex tape and had some sort of sexually repressed freakout that led to him opening the bay doors. I'm much less sure about all of that, I'm just telling you what the people out there are saying. Speaking of what people are saying, people won't stop saying about the identity of Scare Bear. I will say, I actually believe the Scare Bear theorists are a loud minority of the fan base, but they've thrown out lots of suggestions, including, it's 24, he never died. It's the second Brock from Escape to the House of Mummies because he wears a bear skin at the end of that episode. There's also a theory that Scare Bear is Brown Widow / Jared, which would explain how he knows what's going on with Dean and Serena, but I can't really wrap my head around why the Ventureverse version of Spider-Man dresses up in a terrifyingly realistic bear costume. And I've seen it suggested it's some character from the future or their mom. I don't know, I think I've literally seen every single possible character suggested at some point in time. Personally, my Scare Bear theory is that we were never meant to obsess about him. His identity wasn't meant to be anything cool. I could just imagine Doc saying to Jackson, so I need Hank to get a concussion to set up the Comatown stuff in the next episode, but I also need Hank to somehow get to Dean's dorm room to catch him and Serena in the act, and I'm not sure how to get Hank from point A to point B. And Jackson saying, maybe Scare Bear brings him there? He's mysterious and weird, sure. Deus ex Ursa Phobos. I'm closing out this video with a fan theory that will most likely never be tested or proven to be true or false, but it's so damn perfect that it lives in my head as canon even though it's not. This was cooked up by a single Redditor named Swenson. This dude, right here, is the true form of the Sovereign. If you didn't know, the people in this picture are Richard Impossible, Phantom Limb, General Manhowers, and this guy who a lot of folks have speculated was a young alchemist, but Jackson Public said in the art book was actually modeled to look like his childhood friend, Howard Bloom. Reddit user Swenson backs up his claim by stating that everyone else in this photo has risen to prominence in one form or another, except for this guy. Also, the Sovereign has worked with Phantom Limb repeatedly, despite his being backstabbed by Phantom Limb, which points to a possible old friendship first established in the Boys Brigade. He also points at the fact that the Boys Brigade was kidnapped by Force Majeure in 1968, offering this guy his first introduction to guild leadership.
I've been here before.
Yes, Force Majeure had the Boys Brigade here for ransom in '68.
Ah, yes. You know, that probably makes us the first boys in space.
And finally, Reddit user Swenson also references this scene.
Wait, one more thing. Who are you really?
Just some bloke who wanted to be anyone but himself. Toodles!
And says it makes sense that this awkward, dorky teen would want to take on the persona of the ultra-cool David Bowie. Maybe a slight personal attack on Howard Bloom there, but yeah, solid theory all around. That's all I got for today. I'll see you next week with another video. Haven't decided on a topic yet, but go Team Venture.